The morning my parents handed my sister the keys to a brand new Lexus sitting in our driveway with a giant red bow on the hood, I was standing right there in my pajamas, holding a plain white mug. It said hard work pays off. No bow. No wrapping paper. Not even a card. I stood there in the December cold, barefoot on the porch, watching my sister Brianna squeal and jump and wrap her arms around my mother while my dad beamed like he'd just hung the moon. The Lexus was white, gleaming. The bow was almost comically oversized, like something out of a car commercial. And I'm standing there with ceramic in my hands, trying to figure out if this is a joke. It wasn't a joke. My name is Paige Mercer. I'm 31 years old. I have a master's degree in accounting. I've been paying my own bills since I was 22, and for the last 4 years, I have lived in the basement apartment of my parents' home, paying below market rent, yes, but paying. Every month. On time. Without complaint. My sister Brianna is 28. She's never held a job longer than 8 months. She's been in 3 car accidents in the last 5 years, 2 of which were her fault. She lives in a 1-bedroom apartment across town that my parents quietly subsidize. And on Christmas morning, while I stood on that porch in the cold, they gave her a $117,000 car. And they gave me a mug. I want to tell you that I screamed. That I threw the mug on the ground. That I said every single thing I'd been swallowing for years. I didn't. I smiled. I said, "Oh, how sweet." I went inside and made coffee in that mug, actually, because I refused to let irony beat me, and I sat at the kitchen table and I watched my family be happy about a car that I would never receive. And I made a plan. Not out of bitterness. I want to be really clear about that. What I did next wasn't about revenge in the ugly, petty sense of the word. It was about finally telling the truth. About myself. About them. About what had been happening in our family for so long that everyone had stopped noticing it, everyone except me. I spent 3 days writing. I stayed up past midnight 2 nights in a row. I drafted and deleted and rewrote until I had exactly what I needed, 3 envelopes sealed, each one addressed by hand. And on the night of December 28th, when the house went quiet and everyone was asleep, I walked downstairs in my socks, set those 3 envelopes and my house key on the dining room table, and I left. That was 5 months ago. This is the whole story. I need to give you some context, because the Christmas morning moment doesn't hit the way it should unless you understand the years that led up to it. I grew up in a suburb of Raleigh, North Carolina, in a house that my parents worked hard to own. My dad, Raymond Mercer, spent 30 years in pharmaceutical sales. My mom, Diane, was a dental hygienist until her knees started giving her trouble in her mid-50s. They are not wealthy people. They are comfortable people. There's a difference, and I say that with love. Growing up, I was the older daughter. The responsible one. The one who read the instruction manuals and remembered the dentist appointments and made sure the back door was locked before bed. I was 11 years old the first time I realized I was parenting myself. I didn't resent it then. It just was what it was. Kids have an incredible ability to normalize whatever their environment asks of them. I normalized being the one who didn't need to be checked on. Brianna came along 4 years after me. And from the moment she arrived, I watched something shift in my family that I couldn't name for a very long time. As a child, I thought it was just because she was the baby. As a teenager, I thought maybe I was imagining it. It wasn't until I was in college, sitting in a psychology elective I'd taken to fill a credit, that I heard a professor say the phrase, "the invisible child," and felt it land in my chest like a stone dropped in still water. That was me. The invisible child. Not unloved. I want to say that clearly, because I don't want to tell a story that isn't true. My parents love me. I believe that completely and without question. But there is a difference between being loved and being seen. And for as long as I can remember, the version of me that existed in my parents' minds was background noise, competent, reliable, fine. Paige is fine. Paige can handle it. Paige doesn't need much. Brianna needed a lot. Brianna has always needed a lot. And the family reorganized itself around her needs so gradually, so quietly, that I don't think my parents even noticed it happening. It wasn't malicious. It never is in families like mine. It's just erosion. Slow and invisible until one day you look down and realize the ground beneath you has been shifting for years. When Brianna struggled in high school, my parents hired tutors, attended every teacher conference, fought battles with the school administration on her behalf. When I graduated near the top of my class, my mom said, "That's our Paige," and turned back to the stove. I remember standing in the kitchen in my cap and gown holding my diploma, thinking, that's it? That's the whole moment? That was the whole moment. When Brianna got into a minor collision at 17 and was too shaken to drive for months afterward, my parents bought her a gently used car and drove her everywhere she needed to go until she felt ready. When I saved up for my first car at 22, working 2 jobs through the tail end of college, double shifts on weekends, eating instant noodles for a semester, my dad said, "That's the work ethic we raised you with." He said it like a compliment. Like he was proud. And I think he genuinely was. He just never asked why I was doing it alone. I kept achieving. It was the only language my family seemed to receive from me. If I couldn't be the one who needed them, I would be the one who impressed them. I finished my undergrad in 3.5 years. I earned a scholarship to a graduate program. I passed my CPA exam on the first attempt, something only about half of test takers manage. I got a position at a regional accounting firm and worked my way up to senior associate in 4 years. And then I came home. That's the part people always find strange when I tell this story. A woman with a master's degree and a solid career, choosing to live in her parents' basement. But the arrangement made practical sense. The housing market in our area had become genuinely brutal. Rentals were going for prices that made no financial logic when my parents had a perfectly good lower-level apartment sitting empty. We agreed on a real number, not a token, not a favor, and I moved in. I paid rent every month. I contributed to household expenses when things came up. I shoveled the driveway in winter without being asked. I fixed things when they broke because I was the one who knew how. What I didn't account for was how invisible I would remain, even living in the same building as my family. Let me give you the small examples first, because I think the small ones are actually the most telling. My birthday is in March. Brianna's is in July. For 3 years running, my parents hosted Brianna's birthday as an event. The last one was a dinner reservation at a real restaurant, 12 people. My mom made a photo slideshow on her laptop and had it playing on the TV when guests arrived. My last 2 birthdays, my mom called me in the morning and asked if I wanted her to make my favorite cake if she had time later. One of those years, she didn't have time later. I ate leftover pasta for my birthday dinner and told myself I was a grown adult who didn't need a fuss made. I was right. I didn't need a fuss. But there's a difference between not needing a fuss and not being worth one. Holiday gifts. I stopped closely tracking them a few years ago because it felt small to count. But the Christmas before last, Brianna received a weekend trip to Asheville, a cashmere sweater, and a piece of jewelry that I later noticed had a price tag still tucked inside the box. It wasn't cheap. I received a bookstore gift card and a phone case. I thanked my parents genuinely, because I had trained myself to be genuinely grateful for whatever came. I told myself gifts didn't matter. I told myself I was a grown adult with my own income and I didn't need my parents' presence to feel valued. I repeated this to myself with such consistency and conviction that I had almost fully believed it. And then came December 25th. And a Lexus. And a mug. Here's what I found out later, and this part matters, so stay with me. The Lexus didn't come from nowhere. My parents had been planning it for months. My dad had drawn from a savings account they'd been quietly building since Brianna was in her early 20s, a fund, I would later learn, that had no version for me. Not a smaller fund. Not a partial account somewhere. Nothing. When I eventually pressed my dad on this in the conversation I'll tell you about later, he said they'd always planned to help Brianna get on her feet. He said it the way you say something obvious. Casually. Without registering the weight of it. I said, "When were you planning to help me get on my feet?" He didn't answer right away. And then, after a long pause, he said, "Paige, you never needed it." I thought about that mug sitting on the kitchen counter. Hard work pays off. I thought about 22-year-old me working doubles at a restaurant, smelling like fryer oil at midnight, writing graduate school essays on my phone during break because I didn't have a laptop that year. I thought about every rent check I'd written without being asked twice. I thought about every professional setback I'd handled without calling home, every medical bill I'd paid out of pocket, every flat tire I'd changed alone in a parking lot. because somewhere along the way I had learned, so thoroughly that it became reflex, that I was not the daughter you needed to check on. You never needed it. I had taught them that. Unintentionally, incrementally, over the course of 30 years of being reliably okay, I had trained the people who were supposed to love me equally to stop including me in their concern. My competence had become my sentence. That's not something you get angry about, exactly. Not at first. What it actually is grief. The specific grief of realizing that a door you've been waiting to open has been closed for a very long time, and no one was standing on the other side of it. No one was waiting to say, "We see you, Paige. We know what you've built. We know who you are." That moment wasn't coming on its own. So I decided to create it myself. The envelopes took 3 days. I want to describe this process carefully, because I think the way I approached it matters. I wasn't trying to detonate my family. I wasn't trying to wound anyone. I was trying to do something I had never done once in my entire life: tell the truth fully, without softening it for someone else's comfort. Without managing how they would receive it. Without making myself smaller so that the people around me could stay large. 3 letters. 3 people. 3 very different conversations on paper. The first envelope was for my mother. Diane Mercer is a woman who has built her entire identity around being a good mother. I know this about her. I have always known this about her. Which is precisely why I had never, in 31 years, told her how I actually felt. Every time a holiday passed and the imbalance became impossible to ignore, I swallowed it. I protected her from the truth because I loved her, and because somewhere in the back of my mind I was afraid that if I said the real thing out loud, she would defend Brianna, and I would end up more alone than when I started. The letter I wrote her was 4 pages. Handwritten because I needed her to understand this came from my hands and not just my head. That it had a body behind it. I didn't attack her. I didn't compile 30 years of grievances into a list. I started where she could hear me. I told her I loved her. I told her I was grateful for the real things she had given me. The understanding of hard work, the ability to manage my own life without falling apart, a baseline of emotional steadiness that had served me in ways she'd probably never see. And then I told her the truth. I told her that I had spent my entire life sitting across the table from my sister, watching my parents pour their energy and their money and their celebration and their worry into Brianna, while I held my own world together quietly and told myself it was fine. I told her that being strong enough to be okay without something doesn't mean you don't feel its absence. It means you're very, very good at not showing that you feel it. I told her about the birthday dinners. I told her about the gifts. I told her about the savings account I'd learned existed. I told her about standing barefoot on the porch in December cold, holding a mug, while my sister screamed with joy over a car that cost more than I made in 2 years. I told her I was not writing this letter because I wanted the car. I was writing it because I needed her to understand what it means to be 31 years old and arrive, finally, at the understanding that the people who love you have been using your strength as a reason to give you less. That somewhere along the way, being capable had become my penalty. That I had been so thoroughly okay for so long that I had become, in their minds, someone who didn't need to be loved the way they loved my sister. Just acknowledged. Appreciated. Handed a mug. I ended the letter with this: "Mom, I don't want an apology if it's only meant to make you feel better. I want you to actually sit with this and ask yourself whether this is the mother you intended to be. I believe you're better than what these years have looked like. I hope you'll show me I'm right." I sealed it. Set it down. Sat in the silence of my basement apartment and listened to the house above me, the creak of the floorboards, the murmur of the television, the sound of my family existing in the same building, completely unaware of what was sitting on my desk. The second envelope was for my father. Writing to Raymond Mercer required a completely different approach. My dad is a man who speaks in actions. He shows love by fixing things, by showing up with tools, by co-signing and problem-solving and making sure you know how to change a tire. He is not cold. He is just emotionally compressed in a way that means feelings tend to bounce off him unless you hand them to him in a format he can process. So I wrote him 2 pages. Less emotional than my mother's letter. More precise. I laid out the financial reality, not to shame him, but because I knew that facts would land with my dad in ways that feelings alone wouldn't reach. I told him what I had contributed to the household over 4 years of living there. I told him what I now knew about the fund he'd built for Brianna. I asked him plainly in writing, so he couldn't deflect, to tell me what equivalent investment he had made or intended to make in me. Not because I was asking for money, but because I wanted him to look at those numbers and tell me, honestly, what story they told about how he valued his 2 daughters. I told him I had never called him when things were hard because I had learned not to. That I had been so completely trained in self-sufficiency that I had severed the part of myself that was permitted to need him. And I told him that if he looked at that honestly, really looked, I thought he'd understand why a mug that said hard work pays off felt like less than a gift. It felt like a verdict. I ended his letter with a question. Dad, if Brianna had been born first, if she had been the older one, the capable one, the one who figured things out, do you think you would have raised her the way you raised me? Or do you think you raised me the way you did because I let you? Sealed. The third envelope was the one that cost me the most to write. It was addressed to Brianna. Here's the complicated truth about my sister. I don't have a simple feeling about her. I never have. Brianna is not a villain in this story. She didn't scheme or manipulate. She didn't sit somewhere plotting to absorb my parents' attention and resources while I went without. She simply received what was offered to her, and she took up the space that was made available. That's not a crime. That's just being human in a family that made certain things easy for her. But there is an adult version of my sister, a 28-year-old woman who has watched our family's dynamic her entire life, who has never once turned to me and said, "This doesn't seem right." Who accepted gift after gift, gesture after gesture, year after year, without a single moment of looking across the table and wondering what her older sister was or wasn't receiving. And I needed to speak to that version of her. I didn't accuse her of cruelty. I accused her of something I actually think is harder to hear: comfortable indifference. The quiet, uncomplicated indifference of someone who has always been the one the family worried about, and has therefore never had to think about what that cost the person sitting next to her. I told her I loved her, that I wanted a real relationship with her, not the careful, surface-level sister dynamic we'd maintained for years, where we saw each other at holidays and kept our conversations shallow enough that neither of us would have to acknowledge what was underneath. I told her I had always wanted more than that. I had just stopped asking for it because it seemed easier not to. I told her I needed her to know what the mug felt like. Not so she could feel guilty. Guilt without action is just self-indulgence, but because I wanted her to have the full picture. I wanted her to understand that her silence on these things was not neutral, that choosing not to notice is still a choice. And I wanted her to decide, consciously and with full information, what kind of sister she was going to be going forward. I ended with, "I'm leaving for a while. Not forever, I want to be clear about that. But I need some space that isn't managed by anyone else's feelings, including yours. When you're ready to have a real conversation, you know how to reach me. I'll be waiting." 3 envelopes. My house key on top of the stack. I carried them upstairs at 11:30 at night, set them on the dining room table in a house that had gone completely quiet, and I walked back downstairs. I picked up the bag I'd already packed. I'd been thinking about this moment for days, so yes, I was ready. Walked through the side door, got in my car, and drove to my friend Renata's apartment across town. Renata had a spare room, strong chamomile tea, and absolutely no patience for anyone who suggested I was overreacting. I turned off my phone and I slept deeply without waking once, for the first time in weeks. I kept my phone off for 36 hours. When I finally turned it on, sitting in Renata's window seat with coffee going cold in my hands, the screen filled all at once. 22 missed calls, 14 text messages, 3 voicemails. I didn't reach for any of it immediately. I watched the street below for a while. A woman walking a dog. A kid on a bicycle with a helmet 2 sizes too big. The world continuing, unbothered. I let that settle. Then I read the texts. My mother's messages started short and panicked. "Paige, where are you? Your key is on the table. Please call me," and grew longer through the night as the hours passed without a response from me. The last one was sent at 2 in the morning. I've been up since I found the letters. I read yours 3 times. I don't know how to answer everything in it, but I need you to know I'm not okay right now, and I think it's because you're right about some things and I don't know what to do with that yet. Please just tell me you're safe. My dad had sent 3 texts. The first 2 were classic Raymond Mercer, "Call when you can and we need to talk." But the third one, sent at 5 in the morning, stopped me. I've been sitting in the kitchen since 2 a.m. I've been thinking about the question you asked at the end of my letter. I don't have a good answer. I'm not sure there is one that makes any of this okay. I'm sorry it took me this long to notice what I wasn't doing. My dad has never written anything like that in his life. Not to me. Not to anyone. Brianna had sent 6 texts. The first 2 were defensive. One of them said I didn't do anything wrong and this isn't fair, but something shifted around the 4th message. She wrote, I keep getting stuck on the part about my birthday 2 years ago. How I didn't call you until 9 at night. I told myself I forgot because I was busy, but I'm sitting here trying to actually remember if that's true, and I don't think it is. I think I just didn't think you'd mind. And then minutes later, I think I told myself you didn't care because it was easier. I'm sorry, Paige. I'm genuinely sorry. I put my phone face down and I cried. Not the sad kind. Not the angry kind. The kind that comes when something you've been carrying for years finally starts to shift, and your body doesn't know how to feel relief without grieving everything that came before it. Renata handed me a dish towel and sat on the floor across from me and said nothing. Just stayed. Here's what I did next, and I want you to understand why. I didn't call them back. Not that day. Not the day after. Not the day after that. I read every message. I listened to every voicemail. My mom crying, my dad's voice tighter than usual, Brianna saying my name like a question. I heard all of it, and I felt it land genuinely. I knew they had read the letters. I knew something had cracked open in my family that hadn't been opened before. But here's what I had finally learned about myself in that basement apartment over 4 years. I had spent my entire life responding. Someone needed something, I responded. Someone was hurting, I responded. Someone was uncomfortable with the silence I had created, and I rushed to fill it, because that was what I did. That was who I had trained myself to be. The one who made it easier. The one who absorbed the discomfort so everyone else could breathe. I didn't want to do that anymore. Not because I was angry. Not to punish them. But because for the first time in 31 years, I wanted to find out what happened when I just didn't. When I let the silence be theirs to sit in. When I let them hold the weight of it without me coming back to help carry it. So I let the calls go. All of them. Days passed. Then weeks. Renata's spare room became my world. Quiet, small, entirely mine. I went to work. I made coffee. I walked around a neighborhood that wasn't my parents' neighborhood and felt the strange lightness of not belonging to anyone's idea of who I was supposed to be. My mother called every day for 2 weeks. Then every few days. Then once a week. I watched the notifications appear and disappear, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not guilt. Not the familiar anxious pull to fix things, to smooth it over, to go back and make everyone okay again. Just quiet. My dad called 4 times total. That was more than I'd expected from Raymond Mercer, honestly. It told me something. Brianna texted a few more times, longer messages as the weeks went on, more honest, less defensive. In one of them she wrote, I don't need you to respond. I just want you to know I've been thinking about a lot of things. I'm not going to pretend I've figured it out. But I'm thinking. I appreciated that one. I saved it. I still didn't respond. 3 months after I left that house key on the dining room table, I met someone. His name was Theodore. Theo. We met at a work event, the kind of networking dinner I normally found exhausting, and he was the only other person there who also looked like he found it exhausting. We ended up standing near the same potted plant for 40 minutes talking about nothing important, and by the end of the evening I realized I had laughed more in those 40 minutes than I had in the past several months combined. He asked for my number. I gave it to him without overthinking it, which was new for me. Theo was the kind of person who asked questions and then actually waited for the answers. Who remembered small things, a restaurant I'd mentioned once, a book I said I wanted to read, the name of Renata's cat. Who, when I told him on our 4th date that I had recently walked away from my family and wasn't sure what came next, didn't flinch or pull back. He just looked at me and said, that sounds like it took a lot. 3 words. That sounds like it took a lot. Not I'm sure they meant well or have you tried talking to them or family is complicated but they love you. Just acknowledgement. Clean and simple. I think I knew then. 14 months after that networking dinner, on a Saturday afternoon in a small ceremony with 12 people, Renata as my maid of honor, no family drama, no complicated seating chart, I married Theo. It was the quietest, most joyful day of my life. My mother found out through a mutual family friend about 2 weeks later. She called 4 times in one day. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail that I listened to once and then set down, her voice cracking, saying she couldn't believe I hadn't told her, saying she wanted to be there, saying she was so sorry, saying she hoped I was happy. I listened to it. I felt the complicated weight of it. And then I went into the kitchen where Theo was making dinner, put my arms around him from behind, and stood there for a minute just breathing. I was happy. Genuinely, solidly, quietly happy. Not the performance of happiness I had practiced for 31 years. The smiling through Christmas dinner, the washing every dish, the making myself smaller so the room felt larger for everyone else. Real happiness. The kind that doesn't need an audience. Do I think about my family? Yes. Of course I do. I think about my mother's handwriting and the way she used to hum while she cooked. I think about my dad showing up with his truck, wordlessly helping, loving in the only language he knew. I even think about Brianna, her face that last time I saw her, the things she never got the chance to say to me in person. I don't hate any of them. That's the thing people always want to know. Are you bitter? Are you angry? Do you hate them? No, I don't. I just finally chose myself. And choosing yourself, I've learned, doesn't always look like a dramatic confrontation or a tearful reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like 3 envelopes on a dining room table. Sometimes it looks like 36 hours with your phone off. Sometimes it looks like a Saturday afternoon with 12 people and a man who says that sounds like it took a lot and means every word of it. The mug is on our kitchen shelf now. Theo asked about it once. Why I kept it, what it meant. I told him the whole story, start to finish. He listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, he picked it up, turned it over in his hands, and said, I think you should keep it. Not because of what they meant by giving it to you. Because of what you did with it. Hard work pays off. It does. But here is what I know now that I didn't know then. The hardest work isn't the career or the rent checks or the keeping yourself together when no one is watching. The hardest work is deciding, after a lifetime of being invisible, that you deserve to be seen. That you are worth the full version of love. Not the version that gets handed out after the capable daughter has already proven she doesn't need it. You were always worth that. I was always worth that. I just had to be the first one to believe it. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. That means everything to me. If you've ever been the strong one, the one who holds it all together, the one everyone assumes is fine, I want you to hear this. Your strength is not a reason to love you less. It never was. And you are allowed to stop making yourself smaller so that everyone else has more room. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is leave 3 envelopes on a table, walk out the door, and build something entirely your own. Leave a comment below. Have you ever chosen yourself even when it cost you something? I want to read every single one. And if this story stayed with you, please subscribe to Velyra Payback. We upload brand new stories every single day. Hit that bell so you never miss one. I'll see you tomorrow.